Welcome back to the Mixology Talk podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Julia, and we're the folks behind bartenders.com.
So I guess I am the mixology expert in this relationship. And I also,
it's not me.
And I also work with bars and restaurants to help them improve their beverage program.
And I run the shop. What that means is I work with our factories to make sure we really create the best barware out there. I work with our shipping companies to get it all the way to the United States. And I work with our warehouse to make sure it gets to you.
So together, we run bartenders.com and this silly podcast.
It is 2020, which means it's time for us to revisit our annual cocktail trends.
Yeah, I mean, it is February, so we're already into the year, but you know what the hell? Better late than never, right?
A little bit late. That's kind of how we roll. I think people just expect that nowadays.
Absolutely.
So we did not use any algorithms to make this list.
No data mining.
Nope.
Okay, maybe a little bit of data mining, but definitely no AI or any of those cool things that are happening right now.
No real research. If you're just listening to the audio, I just hit some
science
mad bunny ears. No science in this one. We basically just asked the smartest people we know. We went into the Craft Bartender Facebook group and we asked 3,500 of what I would consider to be the best bartenders in the world.
In the world.
Mm-hmm. We're not biased at all.
No.
We asked them, what are the trends that you are seeing looking at the end of 2019 and looking forward into the new year?
Yeah, so this was the list that they came up with after many conversations about, who's where, who's seeing what. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a pretty good list. I think there was a couple common things that were popping up a lot of different places, which I'm really excited about sharing today.
Definitely. And I love asking our community about this because, Chris and I spend most of our time in Southern California nowadays, which means we don't necessarily know what's happening in Europe, in New York, in, elsewhere in the world of craft cocktails. So hopefully this is a pretty decent little survey of what everybody is seeing in the world of craft cocktails and in the industry.
So before we get into the 2020 trends, I thought it'd be important to go back on 2019, see what we predicted, basically kind of see how we scored.
A little bit of a report card.
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Probably. So the first thing that we called out was what we thought would maybe be a little bit of a resurgence of brandy and Geneva. Now it's a little bit unfair to put those in the same bucket because they're quite different.
Right.
But I would say that I feel like brandy has definitely been taking more of a space on cocktail menus. I think that's a good thing. I feel like there was a bit there where brandy had kind of a reputation for being cheap and crummy. And it's nice to see it's taking what I would consider to be its rightful place among your whiskeys and tequilas and mezcals.
Yeah, and I think that part of the issue that the industry faced was that there was no approachable cognacs or brandies in the marketplace. There was a couple, but for the most part, the selection was really limited. And one of the things that we saw over the last couple of years is some really great American brandies coming in for a lot cheaper than an entry-level cognac. So I think that's another thing that we're really getting to see, which is fantastic.
And that's probably why you're seeing this the spirit on the cocktail menu now. I mean, you're not going to mix with the $80 cognac. It doesn't make any sense.
Right, exactly. Especially for like a cocktail menu, a price-sensitive cocktail menu. Geneva, on the other hand, I really kind of struggle with it because I really love it. I think that it is a beautiful product, but I think the amount of education that has to come with that conversation, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I definitely saw it more on cocktail menus.
I would agree. I think there's definitely a little more than last year, a little more than the year before. It's definitely a little bit on the obscure side.
Yep.
I think there was a little bit of wishful thinking here.
A little bit. I'll go ahead and admit that.
It is delicious.
Yeah.
I will say that. It seems like every time we travel, Chris loads me up with a bunch of Geneva to carry home. A worthy cause,
absolutely.
if I may.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know that it's taking a big slice of any cocktail menus anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think one of the other big trends that we saw, we kind of predicted, was something that's probably going to be an overarching, long-term thing, and that is the focus on sustainability.
No surprise here.
Right.
I will say this one really blew up the moment that, basically the plastic straw controversy. It's rare that something goes from being a controversy within the bar community to being mainstream, and this one did.
Accepted, yeah.
Not only did it, but actual laws were passed around this. So huge.
We'll definitely
huge
talk
impact.
about that more for our 2020 predictions. But it was kind of cool to see that it was such a big thing.
Big changes.
And that's only the tip tip of the iceberg as far as sustainability goes.
The next one that we talked about was savory flavors. I don't really see this one making much of a dent last year. I will see one ingredient. I will say that one ingredient I'm seeing more of, which I love, is tahini. I love sesame seeds, so Chris can tell you this. So I'm really excited to see that in cocktails. I'm seeing some really awesome cocktails with that ingredient. I mean, I wouldn't say like it's super common,
right.
But I'm starting to see some creative savory ingredients. I'm seeing mushroom, I'm seeing tahini. Tomato is...
Miso paste.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that
absolutely.
Quite a bit.
Again, I mean, we're not talking a big slice of the pie here. But what I will say is in past years, before 2019, you would never see any savory cocktails, maybe a Bloody Mary or a Caesar, but that was it. But that's changing.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. So another big push or thing that we said, well, I'm not sure where we're going to land on this. So it wasn't really a prediction of like growth or more attention, but it was CBD cocktails. This is so new, and regulation is still kind of getting, passed and all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say there's so much going on in the world of CBD, and I feel like the various alcohol boards are still figuring out what to do with it. I still say we're going to reserve judgment.
Right.
I don't know that it made a huge splash in 2019. I think it's on people's radar, but not getting much further than that because a lot of people are apprehensive about the regulatory impacts of CBD. I would be too if I were running a cocktail program. And I think that what you're going to see is more of that until the states and local governments figure out exactly what those regulations are. Because if there's no regulations, you don't know where to start. But if they give you something, then you've got something to go on. So when those laws start to come through, I think it's going to be, we're probably going to see a greater impact on the cocktail menu. But again, I'm going to reserve judgment on that one.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is we haven't done a lot of research on this, right? From a medical standpoint, like what's the appropriate dosage, what is good, what is bad practice, and all this.
In a cocktail specifically.
Yeah, exactly, because you have a couple different things happening, right? You have two kind of powerful ingredients fighting for dominance, and who knows what the impact on the human body is going to be. So
just a couple years ago, the combination of caffeine and alcohol became heavily regulated, and you got to wonder about CBD and alcohol having similar sort of interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the conversation is still out there. I think the more accepted, marijuana and marijuana products start to become in our, in our social circles, I think that's going to be a little bit easier to kind of make those calls. Right,
absolutely, especially as it comes to the specific versions thereof, like CBD.
Exactly.
And I would say the last one, which is a little bit of a gimme, but I like it, and that is the focus on the guest. I think that this is something that started 20 years ago. But again, I do think that the focus on the guest is continuing to grow. I think that the craft movement continues to build this sort of focus on hospitality and the guest experience. I would say it is going strong.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's been tending bar for a long period of time knows kind of the troubles we've had with that in the past about craft or mixology, so to speak, being focused on the bartender instead of focused on the guest. And I think that as an industry, we're getting well past that point and really putting the energy and our focus on the customer experience and creating a really fun environment at our bars.
Yeah, which is pretty good to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's enough about the past. Now it's time to look forward. So based on our conversation with the bartenders in our Facebook group, we kind of divided things up. We've got first the cocktail trends that we're seeing, and secondly, we're going to talk about some hospitality trends. So first up, cocktail trends.
So one of the big trends that we're seeing in 2020, and it kind of aches at me a little bit, is kind of the death of the word craft. And this is not something like big or anything like that, like the death of mixology, but it's more along the lines of craft has started to become this marketing term now.
It's lost its meaning.
Right.
It's almost like the death of craft because the word craft has become so ubiquitous that it used to mean something. And we can argue and split hairs over what is craft and what isn't craft. But, when I see McDonald's advertising craft coffee, I know that's not it.
Right? Exactly.
Like, come on.
And I know that everybody has their own definition of craft in every space, but it seems like they're taking a lot of liberties with this marketing term now. And so the meaning of it is starting to
go away. And I think that the consumers don't know either. I mean, what the word craft, to me, it used to mean high quality ingredients, making ingredients yourself instead of buying pre-prepared ingredients, avoiding preservatives.
Seasonality.
Focus on seasonality, focus on just fresh and high quality. And now what it seems like craft means is that a marketing team decided to write it on the bottle.
Well, you could probably charge extra 10 cents per item or 30 cents per item or $1.
Yeah.
So
and consumers, I think, have embraced that because they don't know any differently. So, when I tell somebody, it's a craft cocktail versus a not craft cocktail, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It almost, to a lot of people, I think it's just another word for good or fancy, fancy cocktail. Well, anybody could say it's a fancy cocktail. It could be neon green and you could still say it's fancy if it's something you made and you think it's fancy. Little soapbox action. I feel strongly about this, but it is a little bit disappointing because I think that there is a distinction, or there used to be a distinction between craft and not craft, and I do think that is disappearing. Maybe we need another word. Started as mixology and then that got uncool, and then it was craft and now that's uncool. I don't know. We'll have to ask Camper English to come up with something. He seems to be good at this. The next trend that a lot of bartenders mentioned, and which kind of surprised me till I thought about it a little bit more and realized they're totally right, is the resurgence of 80s and 90s cocktails.
Yeah, this was a bit of a surprise, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, as this craft movement has progressed, we've always looked backwards and kind of revitalized a lot of those old school cocktails. I mean, we started back in the 1900s, and now we're just kind of working our way up the timeline.
Just think next year we're going to be redoing last year's cocktails.
2000s!
Arguably, the 80s were 30, 40 years ago.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't do
I don't want to talk about it.
But seriously, that's like solidly in the oldies radio station territory.
Oh, you had to say that.
But it's true. And I mean, I think that what I love about this is that a lot of these sort of bars and restaurants that are bringing back the 80s and 90s cocktails are taking a craft, I hate using this word after just talking about it. I know. They're taking another look at these cocktails and sort of re-envisioning them with high quality ingredients. And what would it mean to make an amaretto sour that's like really ridiculously good? Yeah,
and I think that there's been a couple bars that have really pioneered this. I know there was a bar in New York that was their main focus, is like 70s, 80s, and 90s cocktails. And revisiting those. And I know that this is something that a lot of bartenders, it's a fun time, right? There's a lot of fun you can have with those kind of cocktails.
Also, I mean, they're great drinks. I mean, amaretto sour is a great drink when made well.
Right, exactly.
I think that the sort of the thing that goes wrong with 80s and 90s cocktails is sugar.
Right. Well, and all the artificial ingredients and, the neon greens and the vibrant blues and like all those giant big colors are chemicals.
That's very true.
And, they have their place.
But they're not going to be something you're going to find in a garden anytime soon.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it's a lot of fun. I think this kind of goes down the road of, a little bit more on the customer experience side, having some fun, not taking this mixology or craft cocktail thing too seriously.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of blowback from bartenders too, of like, oh my God, let it die already. So it's kind of fun to have that conversation about 80s and 90s cocktails for sure.
I think so too. And I think, again, a classic Cosmo is a beautiful thing. It's all about how it's made. So I'm excited to see it come back. I do think that you can't be making these 90 cocktails and take yourself too seriously. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
I think as an industry, we could all stand to have a little bit of fun.
So another big trend for 2020 that I don't even think it's a trend anymore. I think it's just kind of a continuation of the 2019 behemoth of low ABV and non-alcoholic spirit-free cocktails.
Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for any time, you know that I have strong feelings about this. In the time since we started this podcast, I have been pregnant twice and had got to go through 2 different 10-month stints of abstinence, and it was a very hard time for me. Yep. So I'm very glad to see this is happening, although I would really appreciate it happening 5 years ago.
And I think that, we've really kind of grown as an industry to really look at some of these movements and really kind of cherry pick what we like. And I think this one is here to stay. I think offering some really creative non-alcoholic options or low alcohol options for a lot of our guests,
Yeah.
is just a really cool thing to be able to do. Not everybody, not pregnancy aside,
There's
not everybody,
lots of reasons why you might not
wants
be
to have a
drinking.
cocktail. Maybe they've had 3 already,
Maybe
and
you
they need
drove.
to pump the brakes a little bit, but they still want something tasty. So it's just a great thing that we're seeing in the industry about everybody
absolutely
putting some on their menu.
I think that there's 2 huge reasons why this is great. First of all, there's an entire segment of the population of your bar or restaurant that was not being served.
Right.
Great, they got a Coke. What a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
You charge what, $3, $2 for a Coke when you could have given them something amazing for $12 with a ridiculously low product cost. Huge missed opportunity. So that's great for both the bars and restaurants from a financial perspective to sort of capture that opportunity, and also for the consumer to have that great guest experience.
Yeah.
What's that like for somebody who doesn't drink to go years and years and years not ever having a great cocktail, and then they come to your restaurant and they can?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
It's pretty cool.
That's really fantastic. So I would agree with Chris. I don't even know if I'm going to call this a trend. I think it's here to stay. We went to a restaurant just the other day and they had 3 different seed lip cocktails on the menu.
It was pretty cool to see it.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and I mean, this also brings up the point of there's a lot of new products out there that really kind of cater to this non-alcoholic, spirit-free cocktail menu. I know Seedlip is a big one out there, but there's definitely a handful of other companies out there, which makes our job as cocktail creators a lot easier.
Absolutely.
So we definitely appreciate that. And I think that on the low ABV side, one of the other things that we'll see, and I think this was a prediction we made in 2018, was kind of a trend or kind of a use of vermouths more, of sherries more, even Amarian cocktails. I don't think that's a trend. I think that's here to stay. But I think adapting those into your beverage program has definitely grown with the low ABV movement as well.
Absolutely. And just one more thing before we move on. The other side of this, which I think is wonderful, is, all of the bars and restaurants out there that don't have a full liquor license, now they can offer a cocktail program.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
an entire a huge segment of the industry that simply didn't have the option before, or perhaps didn't know they had the option before, and now they can offer wine cocktails, beer cocktails, low ABV cocktails, without getting the more expensive and harder to get liquor license.
How cool would it be to go to the first place for me that I think of like somebody that offers beer or wine but not a full liquor license, is like a family Chinese restaurant. How cool would it be to go in and have some like really killer Chinese food and get like a non-alcoholic or like a vermouth cocktail at the Chinese restaurant? Cool. I'd be pretty excited about that. Don't think it's going to happen.
And again, this is an offering that restaurant or bar could do without having a huge product cost, without necessarily,
going through liquor license.
Right.
Yeah, and the expense. I mean, everybody knows how expensive they can be. But yeah, just a whole nother avenue of options that people can give to their guests.
Yeah, I would say not even going to call it a trend. Well, we'll include it in the list because we're talking about it. But this one's here to stay.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
I'm willing to stick my finger in that one. That's staying. So the last big cocktail trend that we're going to highlight here is kind of, I think, probably another here to stay sort of situation.
Yeah, I think we can fully retire it into that category.
And it's something we talked about last year because you can't not talk about it, and that is ice.
Ice.
Not just any ice.
Large format clear ice.
Fancy pants.
Fancy ice. So last year it was big. It was a really big movement, and it has been kind of trickling up for the last couple of years, but 2019 it really kind of took off.
Yeah.
And the reason I was on the fence with it personally is because of the costs involved with it, not only from a equipment standpoint, but just your staff. I mean, having to do this kind of a program is pretty intense.
It's pretty different versus just sort of having an ice machine going in the background. I mean, the staffing, the training, the commitment that goes into a hand, or not necessarily hand cut, but a specialty ice program is huge.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a serious barrier to doing this sort of thing in your bar and restaurant in the past years. But what we're seeing now is that if you are having a truly craft, there's that word again, cocktail program, I think that it doesn't really matter how hard it is. I think consumers are starting to expect high quality ice.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think it is weird almost going into a really nice craft bar ordering an old fashioned or like your favorite whiskey on the rocks and getting crappy ice with it. I think it's out of place
sort of
now.
like hemicircle ice
Yeah.
that comes out of your freezer.
Right, exactly.
It definitely gets in the way of your experience. If you're sitting there, you're ordering something that to you is quite expensive based on your market, and then it shows up with just kind of like, you know...
banquet ice.
Yeah, that's a good word, banquet ice. I mean, I don't want to be snooty about it, but
I don't either, but...
it's a part of the guest experience.
Right, and I think that, you know, there's levels of this. You know, if you buy the silicone mold and it's a little bit cloudy, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But I think attention to the ice program in general, I think it's here to stay. I mean, we probably could have made this prediction a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it's fully entrenched in our community, and I think our guests definitely expect that kind of level of service and detail now when it comes to craft cocktails.
I would agree with that. So I think I mentioned this in the beginning. We have now talked about all the cocktail trends, and now it's time to switch over to the industry trends. This is the stuff that doesn't necessarily go in a glass, but it's more around the people working behind the bar and how they get your cocktail into the glass.
Mm-hmm. So last year, sustainability was a huge part of our environment as craft bartenders. And I think Julie even mentioned it before. There was some huge wins in this area last year, you know, with the straws, the California's ban on plastic straws, and I think a couple other states as well.
Yeah.
So this was such a big thing for us. And I think it forced us to kind of explore new options as far as what kind of straws we can offer to our guests.
Yeah.
Because previously it was just paper.
Yeah, paper, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think we've all had our experience with paper straws, and I mean, good for them. They filled a gap in the industry at the moment, but I think we're on to bigger and better options for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, like, as we look at the trend of sustainability, there's kind of two sides of it. There's like just like the long tail of sustainability, which is like the crazy stuff. This is where you get like trash tiki and like people being really out there to be like crazy sustainable. And I think that's
pushing
awesome.
boundaries. Like,
absolutely.
What they're doing in trash tiki is amazing.
Somebody's got to start this, right? But then over time, some of these techniques bubble down to the rest of us. And what I'm seeing, looking forward at 2020, I think is sustainability becoming the norm. You know, we went out to cocktails the other day, I think I mentioned this, and Chris got a cocktail with a weird straw, and we all tried it, and we're like, that's not paper.
Right.
And it's not plastic.
And we actually had to ask.
We had to ask.
The server.
You'll never guess.
Yeah, it was avocado pits.
Avocado pits.
Yep. And this is just
So
one example of kind of the straws that are out there. I mean, I know hay straws is a big thing.
Yep.
I know...
Pasta,
that's right.
Pasta.
Yeah, and grass. I know some of the other grasses from Asia and bamboo. They're definitely making a big movement. And
obviously, stainless steel as well is one that has been around, but also has a bit of a cost sort of barrier to it. But there are so many options now, and I think that what I'm excited about is instead of this being like, oh, I went to a bar and I got a weird straw, it was such a crazy experience. It's the norm now. Not every state, of course. I think the state of California, where we are, is a little bit different because there is a law around that. But I think that what we're starting to see across the board is things that used to be really out there sustainable practices are gradually trickling into the mainstream because they're economical, because they're required by law, because they're just the right thing to do.
Right.
All of the above.
Well, and I think that, as we start to value these things as bartenders and people in this space, I think that brands are starting to take a notice of this as well. I remember an article that came out about a month ago where Jose Cuervo is now producing, I don't know if they're producing it or funding it or whatever, but agave-based straws from the fibers from tequila. And I was like, that's awesome.
What else were you going to do with it?
Yeah,
that's a perfect example.
It's great to see. And the more the merrier, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as this conversation goes.
Definitely. I wasn't really sure if this next session should be completely separate or part of sustainability, but we went with a separate section. And that is the use of local ingredients. ingredients. Now, this always kind of depends on the market, because if you're in North Dakota in January, you're going to have a hard time finding local citrus.
Citrus, right? Or herbs.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're growing it in your bathroom, which more power to you. Not everybody's going to have the option of using locally sourced products. But what we are seeing is, as you see more microbreweries, as you see more micro distilleries, as they sort of spread across the U.S. and beyond, it means there are more local options. And I think that you're seeing folks using them.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see. I mean, I remember, when I first tended bar 15 years ago, there was 5 gins you could choose from, and that was pretty much it. And now
no local choices there.
There was no local choices. Everything came from somewhere else. So seeing so much different, samples and different liqueurs and liquors at our disposal on a local level is just super, super cool. And I think, the whole craft beer movement has absolutely exploded. I mean, if you're in a small town and you don't have a craft beer
Let me
provider,
know. We'll go start one.
I know it's kind of almost.
I don't think there's any left, right?
Right.
No towns left.
But then people start moving into craft spirits as kind of an evolution of that, and it's really cool to see all of these different craft spirits coming out in the local areas.
Absolutely. So definitely seeing that. I mean, it has been happening. It will continue to happen. I just had a conversation the other day with an owner of a craft cocktail, or I should say a nightclub with a craft cocktail program that sources a lot of their fresh ingredients from their GM's garden.
That's pretty cool.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, you would never have seen that 10 years ago.
Right, and talk about seasonality. I mean,
right?
you don't have a choice.
Hopefully it was his garden, not his bathroom.
Well, never mind. I wouldn't even touch that one.
No comment.
If you're North Dakota and it's winter and you're growing stuff in your bathroom, I hope it's something else.
North Dakota, right? We won't go there. That is not sustainable.
Anywho.
I don't think this is going away. I don't think local sourcing is going away. I think that if we do see an economic downturn, there may be a little bit of a constriction of this. But fingers crossed. I love seeing the tremendous number of local options.
Yeah.
I love seeing a craft cocktail menu with local spirits on that menu and local produce. I think it doesn't get better than that. So hopefully that doesn't go anywhere. I don't think it will, but if there is a major economic downturn, sometimes you can see some impact with the smaller producers. So
right, absolutely. But
knock on wood.
Knock on wood. So the last major trend that I know I've been seeing and it's been coming across our radar is about career development. And this is really exciting to me. I think it was either a year before, like in 2019 or 2018, I did a real big focus on bartender entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So it kind of a sweet spot in my heart. But craft cocktails have been around for the better part of a decade, much longer than that, but mainstream for at least about a decade. And those bartenders are starting to look for other ways to express themselves creatively or in a business. And I think that's what we're starting to see is, people looking for new avenues to make it their own.
Absolutely.
And it's really great.
Yeah. And one thing that I've been seeing come up just time and time and time again within the craft bartender community on Facebook is mobile bartending.
Yeah.
Either folks they have a mobile bartending business, they're about to start a mobile bartending business. I mean, there are lots of folks doing that. I love it. I love to see it. I love to see that community congealing. If I remember correctly, there is actually a mobile bartending conference in a couple weeks. There
is, yeah. This was actually
I'll include a link to that in the show notes for sure, which that's cool, right? I mean, something's going a little mainstream if you have a whole conference about it, which I think is fantastic. But what I love about mobile bartending is that it lets the bartender really be in charge of the guest experience, like end to end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing. Like I've been following a couple of people that run mobile bartender services on Instagram, and the things that they can do on a mobile set, or, they have their own car, they have their own wagon, whatever it is.
What is it? One
pretty cool.
You interviewed somebody recently for Punches, I think. We'll include this in the show notes. Who has like a vintage trailer?
It's pretty amazing. And
I kind of want to live in it. It's adorable.
It's very cool. But I mean, the level of customization you can get to your guest is pretty remarkable, and it just sounds like so much fun, and it's a great kind of logical next step to tending bar.
Yeah.
A lot of your regulars come up to you, may have come up to you and say, hey, I'm doing a party, can you come up with a cocktail, or can you cater for me? And then all of a sudden you're on your own and you can do this now.
Well, and I think the other side of this is, as the community of skilled bartenders ages, they might have spouses and families, and they want to have the ability to set their own schedule and going out and, hanging your own shingles, so to speak. Yes, you're going to have to work nights and weekends, but at least you can choose which ones.
Right.
So that is something that you can work around your own family and make sure you're still showing up at your kid's birthday party.
Yeah.
Which isn't really a concern if you're 21.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe you don't have a family to work around, and so that's fine. But I think as a community grows up, there are only so many positions in the industry that allow for schedule flexibility.
Yeah.
And this is one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a way that, you can really become your own boss and still have that creative license that we have with our beverage programs, but in like a more business focus. And I'm really excited to see this trend really start to populate. I think one of the things that we talked about in that series was like bartenders going out starting their own syrups companies or bitters companies and mixers companies, and that's fantastic. And all of these different ways to provide more products and stuff for our community is really, really cool. So it's a topic and a trend that I
And you did an interview about mobile bartending, correct?
I did. Yeah, right, we did a couple.
I'm trying to think. We'll definitely put that in the show notes too. But I think overall, this sort of focus on sort of the whole bartender from a career development perspective is definitely something that's happening.
Yeah, very excited.
So last but absolutely not least, one of the biggest trends that I have been seeing, especially as I look at sort of events and conferences and things like that, is a focus on physical and mental health for the bartender. And if I might say so myself, it's about damn time.
Yeah, and I think this is something that popped up a couple of years ago and has slowly started to evolve. And I think that one of the big driving forces, and I'll give them the credit they deserve, is brands.
Yeah.
Brands have really adapted this as a way to approach bartenders, to embrace them and to show them, that they care about them. I don't know how much of it is marketing or not, but I think that giving them the opportunity to increase their health and their ability to work longer behind the bar and like really give them some avenues to be better physically is absolutely fantastic.
I think that there's definitely been some key moments in our industry in the last couple of years where we've lost some people that were
every year.
Extremely important to the industry, important to the people in the industry, which really shone a light on the mental and physical health side of the industry. There's no sugarcoating it. This is a really hard industry, and not a lot of people are out there looking after the bartender. So I'm so thrilled to see this changing. I think that we need more of this.
Yeah.
I think that, it's just a hard job. It's just a really hard job. And so I'm so thrilled to see brands are starting to throw money at this. I mean, just the other week I saw a local, it was like a symposium on, hospitality. I think it was a mental health workshop. Like, you never would have seen that 5 years ago. I think we started to see a little bit of this at Tales of the Cocktail. That's where I first saw it. Right. You would have, early morning, like a juice, runs or yoga and things like that. But I think that as mental health became a little bit less sort of hush-hush, we've been willing to talk about it as an industry, knowing that our industry is one that suffers a lot in this way. So I'm thrilled to see this changing. I hope it doesn't go anywhere. I hope that if anything, the investment continues. Bartenders have an extremely physical job. And once again, as the population of bartenders grows up, I don't know about you, but I'm not as spry as I used to be.
Well, and I mean, this was one of the big things that pulled me out of the industry behind the bar is just the beating you take behind there. I fully acknowledge that I am not fit to be behind a bar anymore. And I think I would embarrass myself if I were to go back behind a busy bar. I think it would I think it would hurt. But I think that, events like bartender boxing that happens at Tales of the Cocktail is a really great spotlight to really focus on our health, not only physically but mentally. There's been many USBG events that have been let's go out on a hike, let's do yoga in the morning, let's go do a scavenger hunt or something like that, just to get us away from the normal day-to-day stuff that we talk about as bartenders. And I think it's fantastic. Yeah. And as Julie mentioned, I fully support this. I think it's a beautiful thing and will hopefully only continue to get better over time.
Absolutely. So we'll check in next year on that.
2021. So that does it for our 2020 predictions. Some of them are new, some of them are continuations from the 2019 predictions and trends that we were seeing. But either way, hopefully this gives you some insight into where we're heading as an industry. And I'm sure we missed some, so if you have any, please let us know as well.
Definitely let us know in the comments. Some of these are a little bit perhaps aspirational. I know we definitely have some high hopes for the industry overall, but good things are happening.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty
really excited to see the direction that the industry is going, the direction that cocktail menus are going. I think these are all good things. I think there's a lot of great people out there working really hard to move all of this in the right direction. So definitely grateful for that. So before we go, I did want to mention the month of February, we're having a deal on our 4-piece bar kit. I should probably have brought one to show you, but oh well. I mean, it's really our core set. It's our classic shaker, weighted, unweighted Boston shaker. It's just the absolute workhorse shaker with our Japanese jigger and our Hawthorne strainer. It's a good one. It's 15% off if I remember correctly. So you can find that at our shop, which is shop.abarabub.com. If you need some barware, that's a good place to go. If you don't,
stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah, a little partial to it, but that's us.
We're biased. A little bit biased. But yeah, I guess we'll catch you next year.
Yeah, for the next round of predictions.
Hopefully you listen to the podcast before next year.
Well, and I think 2021, our predictions are going to be like, whoa, we were so wrong. Oh my gosh, what were we thinking?
I hope not. There's some good things happening.
Good stuff, yeah.
So hopefully
absolutely.
They stick around, and I guess we'll see in a year how right or wrong we were.
Yep, and then we'll have some more podcasts coming up soon.
Check the show notes at mixologytalk.com/170. Wow.
Welcome to the Mixology Talk podcast. I'm Chris, and the funny lady over here is Julia. And together, we run this silly, silly podcast. Okay. 3, 2, 1. You ruined it. That was it. What up? It's getting weird, isn't it?
It's
how we roll.
Yeah,
anyways, here we go. Podcast time.
Stop it!